Let's begin with a Hail Mary. I'd like to do that first. Give this message in Blessed Mother. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. So my son was ordained a priest in May, my oldest son. I get the stole. That's like I'm counting on that, getting me in. So we have 40 acres up in Wisconsin, and as his contemporaries went through seminary and the priesthood, they would go hunting up there a lot. And my wife and I, who are now from Florida, were up there. And there's two priests in here who are like, "Are you going to tell this story?" Because they heard it yesterday. Yeah, I actually am, because there's a point in it. So when we went up there, it was very cold, and she is a Naples, Florida woman, tried and true. And I said, honey, we can actually escape to a little more. It's like 50 degrees, I know, but if we go up to, it's called Pitbull Ridge, and that's where we hunt and just do all that stuff. I said, if we go up there, there's this area where we can pull the Jeep up and just face it where the sun is. There will be no wind, and we can actually just get some sun. So I'm up there with my wife. And it's just like that, but she's a little nervous about, taking off her jacket because it's cold. So I just try to make her laugh. So I take off my shirt, and then just to make her laugh, I just drop trowel all the way. And then I look up, and I see a trail cam that the priest set up. And I am like, oh my gosh. Thankfully, I don't think they could actually see that, but that'd be scarier than a coyote for sure. And if you just want to know whether or not I've been vulnerable in front of priests before, it's happened. That's my point. Okay, there is a reason I am confident in the message that I'm going to send. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the history that I have to provide an insight into an additional level of, I think, receptivity I have to the challenges that you face. But I'm one of the three founders of Lighthouse Catholic Media, and the reason that that's significant, although I'm not involved anymore, is because we got in and out of the doors of, well, more than that, but we actually were in over 6,000 parishes with the product, which means that we had probably about 9,000 face-to-face conversations with priests about the challenges that they face when it comes to evangelization, what takes place. The businesses that I've built are larger businesses. They, we deal with many, many, many people. I've been on Relevant Radio for years, Ave Maria Board of Trustees, that sort of thing. So there's an integration between the Catholic world and then the secular businesses that I build, which is a very, very real one. And I've, throughout the years, and I'm 55 now, I have 9 kids, I have 9 grandkids, so I kind of see the world differently than I did when I was young, right? And you get pounded through it in many different ways. But as I've gotten older, people have said, hey, could you give a Catholic leadership talk? And my response as I've gotten older is, I don't know how to do that. I don't know any more than I would know how to be a physician and have somebody come in and then go, oh, you're Catholic? Well, then let's talk about your heart this way, or your foot this way, or your leadership is leadership. It just straight is. I'll tell you, this is what I would say. I would say if you were going to actually parse out the difference between Catholic leadership and other leadership, the other leadership talks would be a reduction of Catholic leadership talks. But I don't know what to leave out. I'm like, okay, if I'm going to talk to leaders of corporations or the people who lead my businesses, and I want them to be great, what part will I leave out? I won't leave it out. I'm just going to use non-Catholic terms to bring them all the way up to the level of Catholic leadership. So you are at the apex of what it means to be a Catholic leader. And the interesting thing is this, that a parish priest in particular has a very unique leadership role that you all know about. See, if you were a Dominican or maybe a Jesuit, you might have a different charism, and you would know what success looks like through that charism. But what is success for you? As a Catholic priest, besides the salvation of your own soul, which is an ultimate success for all of us, but what is success? Like if you were to say it, well, how would you say it? Like out loud? Proclaiming the good news? Salvation for? Parishioners? Does it stop there? Every single soul that lives in your parish geographical area, Catholic or not. Okay? Why is this important? Because if we make things simple, we can get things simple. I am absolutely flabbergasted as a leader at how complex people make things. Half of what I do as a leader when I'm building organizations and building companies, and then, by the way, I deal with private equity because we're selling the companies, and there's like tons of lawyers involved and everything else, and I listen to these conversations, and I cannot believe how often two people are like toddlers. Have you ever seen two little children talk to each other about completely two different things, but they're acting like they're having one conversation? That is what adults are like if they're not paying attention. Like, even when you ask information, like, you need to know something, like, for demographic reasons and research to be able to make investments into further things. So you ask somebody who is supposed to know how many people were at the meeting, and the response is, oh, it was a great meeting and we had chicken. And you're like, okay. And I'm always watching that you, like it's a sport, like, you gonna accept that? Okay. And so there's a follow-up, which is, I'm glad the chicken was good and it was a good meeting. How many people were there? Oh, it was a lot. What are you going to do with that research? You've got to like get to the point, right? And that matters. Well, there's another way to get to the point that's very significant. If you were an NFL coach, what is your mission? By the way, to tip you on this, it's like super short and simple. Win the Super Bowl. If you have a mission other than win the Super Bowl as an NFL coach, you should be fired. That's super, I mean that, by the way. That's not like soft language, or you absolutely should be fired. What if your mission as an NFL coach were to gather and unite the community of fans, regardless of race, gender, or to have a spirit of what? What in the world is that? That is a total waste of time. Okay? Because let me ask you something. If you don't win games, will you gather the people into the... No, you're going to have them hate each other, not show up, and throw stuff at you. If you win the Super Bowl, what's going to happen? They're going to be gathered regardless of age, race, creed, blah, blah. They're all going to be gathered. So when you go after the main mission, you accomplish the other missions. So if you were to take, like if I were to say there's like one major nugget that you could walk away with here that really helps, it would be, I'm going to write a book, actually titled this as time comes along, called The Law of Primary Responsibility. And it is an actual law, the law of primary responsibility. When we go after our secondary responsibilities and we cede our primary responsibilities, we cannot get our primary responsibilities done, and we almost never get our secondary responsibilities done. I'm going to give you an example outside of the priesthood, but it applies very much to you. And by the way, in your own way, you could say, well, gosh, where does that apply? So for salespeople, when I'm training salespeople, and I do this for CEOs, I do it for whatever their role is. But sales is great because it's kind of like sports. It's an analogy that even if you're not in sales, you can kind of relate to. So salespeople have to get in front of customers. That's the thing that matters most. So depending on the industry, most sales positions are pretty simple. It's like, okay, you should be in front of 3 customers a day or 5 customers a day. And so you need to get 3 yeses, confirmations that you will get 3 appointments every single day. Everything you do besides that is not important. That is the main thing. So when I build companies, we usually apply this to the sales field. Now, in our accounting departments and marketing departments and productivity departments, we apply something else, but it's similar. So you need to get your 3 S's. That's the number 1 priority. Everything else is secondary to that, because without appointments, everything stops. And by the way, if you want to know how you're doing your job, which most people want to know, don't they? Did you know that, by the way? It's a good thing, too, for your employees. The number 1 concern of a new employee, and even old employees, is how do they think I'm doing? That is actually the number 1 concern. How do they think I'm doing? And if they know how they're doing, good or bad, their anxiety will be reduced, their job satisfaction will go up, and you will know whether or not they are supposed to stay or not. So I always want people to know how they're doing without me having to tell them. Now, I also tell them, I will tell you, okay? I'm going to interact with you as a leader. That's going to be very important. I'm not going to neglect that. But there's going to be the day that I'm traveling or gone, or I've just been busy with so many other things I couldn't actually get to you. And I want you to know how you're doing without me telling you. If you get 3 S's every single day, in fact, just on that day, you can know, I think you're doing an outstanding job. I mean, if you got 4, you'd be doing like superhuman work, but if you get 3, you're doing fantastic work. If you get 2, what do you think I'm going to think of how you're doing? You could do better, right? That's good wording for it. It's not like you're horrible, but like you could do better. If you get 1, how do you think you're doing? So when you talk to them and you ask them questions, and I'm going to pull this back to like a certain number of steps we're going to go through, but I'm kind of painting a mosaic here. When you ask them the question, if you were to call them and say, how many yeses do you have today? If they have 3 or more, in fact, this is what it sounds like. Hey, Bob, hi, I got 4, I have 4. That's what it sounds like. You don't even have to ask, okay? If you do have to ask, you say, how many yeses do you have? If they have 2, they'll tell you, because it's close enough to 3 that you know they're serious about it. If they have 1, they'll probably even tell you. But if they have 0, it sounds like this. Hey, Bob, I got a question for you. How many yeses do you have today? Oh, yeah, I'm glad you called. I have a question. There's this one client. Well, it just happened, didn't it? Try to, like, do the, well, you want to sell me Death 6? You want to go rethink your life Jedi mind trick? It doesn't work if you're a good leader because you know you need to get to the point of what is taking place. Now, you can't get to the point as a jerk. You have to get to the point with a lot of grace and with a lot of virtue. So the conversation sounds like, oh, that sounds really important. I want to definitely get to that. Before we get to that, do you mind if we get to some vital signs first? How many yeses do you have today? Well, you know, hey, by the way, just so you know, if you don't have them, there's plenty of time. I'm sure you're intending to get them, but I just need to be able to know what the number is now so we can kind of move forward. So like in like 1 syllable, unless it's 11 or 7, how many do you have? Okay? And then you'll get that number, but you're getting to you have to keep people on point constantly as leader, constantly keep people on point. And also we have to know what the point is of what we're doing so that secondary responsibilities don't get in the way. I am not going to say one thing to you that you don't know today. That is not my charism, is to come out and go, oh my gosh, what a brilliant new thought. What I have the gift of doing, and it is a charism, is taking things that you already know and packaging them in a usable way. That is something that I have been able to do in life. And I wasn't even able to describe it until, as it grew a little bit older. And I was like, okay, what is it? Like, I don't feel any smarter than these people, but I do see that there's a bunch of pieces on the board, and I just help them put them in the right spot. So what would that be? Why are you working on the fundraiser to remodel the bathrooms at the parish? There's one reason you're doing that: to save souls. Because without the bathroom, people are going to be disinclined to want to go there because they're uncomfortable, and if they're not there, they can't hear the message of salvation, and therefore, that's why you're doing it. Okay? This is the law of primary responsibility. I'm not a big race fan, but whenever I have watched the races, I think for me the favorite part is seeing the pit stops. There's always somebody that comes up to the car while they're changing the tires and filling the gas and just like wipes off anything on the windshield, right? There could be something that, some debris or whatever, make it easier for the driver. Or they'll even sometimes wipe off his helmet. And can you imagine this? They get the tires done, they get the gas filled, and the guy's going, he's like telling you to wait because he's got little bug spray, spot that he wants to get there. Like, this is such a secondary responsibility. But the reason this analogy works well is because you have all sorts of people on your team, don't you, that report to you. See, you are like a heavy-duty, high-level leader in what you do because you lead a staff, you have an enormous amount of autonomy, and that staff helps you, in turn, lead everybody that is a current active parishioner, which then leads to the people who aren't very active as parishioners, which leads to everybody that's not even Catholic and just lives in the area, which is to fulfill your mission, right? We can't hit a target we don't aim at. So if our aim is, and we would hear things like this in Lighthouse Catholic media all the time, can somebody bring me back to the pit stop analogy? And I want to talk about like subordinates in your group aligning their mission, because I'm going to go on a departure here. The conversation we'd have sometimes, back in the day when Lighthouse, are you familiar with Lighthouse Catholic Media? So the CDs. So when we would go in and we would say this, sometimes what you would get is a priest that would say, well, just so you know, nobody here, now this goes back to 2005, nobody here owns a CD player because our entire parish is really old. So we're not going to buy it. Let's just think that through like 15 years worth of the remaining funerals that are there in that parish. Okay, that is a statement of preparation for closing a parish. So why don't we evangelize in a way that draws people in who actually are the same age of people who would actually have seeds. Like, in other words, the handling of the objection is an entire missing of the point. It is to minister only to those people who are going to be there until they die. And that's it. It is to not extend that beyond. So why is it that, and it usually wasn't the priest saying it, was usually somebody that was speaking on behalf of the priest. So why is it that we have people that get confused about things? Well, here's why. If they don't know the overarching mission, they can't participate in it, and they will get in its way. They will be the person that's trying to scrape the bug off the windshield while you're trying to win a race. So you're trying to, in very simple terms, save the souls of everybody who lives in that geographical parish area. That is what you're doing. And if a person cannot draw a line from that to from what they're doing to that, they should not be doing it, and you should get rid of it. That can eliminate a lot of jobs, by the way, just so you know. I cannot draw a line between here and here. And then you also have to deal with, and by the way, this isn't just because you're priests, this is because you're human, and in leadership organizations, there's always 3 audiences working within the organization, and for whatever their motives are, I can't always tell you, but there are 3 people. There are people more into the mission than you are, despite how into it you are. There are people that just need to be convinced on a regular basis that the mission is important, and they will be inspired to do so, and there will be people who will run against your mission. And some of the stories that I have, that you all have too, we don't need to retell them, of the undermining that people have faced, like bishops and whatnot, by people very close to them who are running against their mission. It's unbelievable. I have also faced that. Now, sometimes it's a direct attempt to destroy the mission. We should never be surprised by that, by the way, in any natural organization, especially in a supernatural organization like the church, because there are powers and principalities that are going after this. They work more subtly in other places, but they're running against the mission. And sometimes when they run against the mission, they do it in ways that will not seem like overt, but they do it with a smile, in almost a passive-aggressive way. I recently had a circumstance where I went to one of my teams and I said, we need to have, there was a data point we needed. We need 20x of something in our next cycle. And I went to the person who leads this part of the organization, and I said, there is no tool that you cannot have, there is no resource, and there is no authority that you do not have that is not at your discretion to be able to get this done. Okay, the worst thing when you lead somebody is that you give them a task, but you don't give them the tools, resources, and authority to get it done. That's a horrible thing. So he had everything that he could possibly had, and I even kept showing him. I was like, and look at this toolbox, and look at this over here, and you might not even know this is available to you, but there's also this, okay? And we need 20. And then the whole team, 20. We need to know 20. It's not on pace, and I could tell that these were just irresponsible reasons. I finally say to him, we're not quite there yet, and I know you're not a prophet, but what would you guess we're going to land at? And he said, well, my goal has always been 10. I did not respond at that moment, which was smart. Okay? Your goal was 10. That's very interesting. That's very interesting. Okay? And then, he tried gaslighting me. You never mentioned 20 to me. But yet everybody else in the organization knew it was 20. I'm deliberating this person's future, by the way, right now, with a few more opportunities to make a change. But that happens. Okay, so let's break down these things. I'm going to break down 8 specific things. I've been kind of moving through some of them together. Okay, but the first one is the mission and the goal. If I were to walk in to your parish and ask everybody there, what is the primary responsibility for us as a unit? Or what is the mission here? Now, by the way, if there's a mission statement that you wrote, I get it. I know how those work. But I am just going to say, when I go to corporations, I have them shred their mission statements almost always. Because the mission statement is, I didn't know that was going to happen, but I'm glad. And the reason I do is because the mission statement is designed to get a bunch of people who are moving in radical, differently directions in line to move in the same direction in a very clear, defined, and understood way. So when it's, first of all, even if it's like really good and articulate but long, it's totally a waste. So you know what I would go to corporations with this? I would say, okay, I want everybody to stand up together with me, other than I'd pick out like the Jason who invited me, you know, other than Jason who invited me, and I see that the CEO is here, why don't you, because I know you already know this, but I want everybody else to stand up, and together, let's recite the company mission statement. You know, like the Pledge of Allegiance, and they're all like, what? And the CEO is like, thanks, man, because I don't know it either, okay? If they don't know what the mission is, they cannot accomplish it. And if the mission is not written with a primary responsibility that supersedes everything else, that they have to be able to connect to it, they can't get it done. It will not work for them. They have to be able to see this, or they're going to constantly be washing the windshield when you're trying to win the race. Then there's a boldness about this. If I were to say the number one white elephant in every single company that I help people build when they're a CEO or leadership, and that's why this is not separate from what you're doing as parish priests. And by the way, you say, well, I remember when I was young, and I started speaking on this because I was successful in my own companies and I was writing books, but I really wasn't as long in the tooth. I mean, I have an AARP card now. Well, I would if I chose to be affiliated, but at least the invitations come in the mail. So, but I remember that somebody said to me when I was young, they said, well, just so you know, the priesthood is not a business and a parish is not a business. And I was like, yeah, I know, but I'm not saying it like that. And I just left kind of confused because I was like, I don't see that is a reason for anything that I'm talking about not to apply. And as the years came by, it was actually a reason for them to apply even more, okay? The church has always operated on numbers, hasn't it? The church and numbers have a very, very important relationship, and it started in the Bible when they talked about how many were baptized that day. And the Great Commission came out, so they already started keeping track. And this was a good system to use. The reason that I say that is because quite often, if I was building a non-for-profit, like a lighthouse, there would be somebody necessarily, maybe in sales or something, or in other volunteer organizations, and they would be late or not doing their job or kind of lazy in it. And if I would kind of approach them about that, this is what they would usually say. Well, just so you know, like especially if it was like Lighthouse where you can get paid when you're selling the CDs. And by the way, tons. They get paid so much that I'm telling you, if they wanted to never retire for the rest of their life ever and to live in great poverty, that's how much they would make if they were the number one person there. They didn't make much at all, okay? But they did make a little bit. And it was literally pennies on the dollar. But if I would say to them, you know, hey, let's talk a little bit about, you know, your performance and the number of appointments you've had, they would inevitably say this, well, just so you know, I'm not doing it for any of that. I'm doing it for Jesus. And a vein would just pop out of my head instantly. And I would say, what did you say to me? Okay. I want to tell you what the difference between doing this for Jesus and the way you're doing it looks like. If you were doing it for Jesus, it would look a lot like that. You look a lot like a bag of chips and soda on the couch. I didn't actually say that, but that's really good, isn't it? I probably should have said that. This is a problem. If you were doing this exclusively for Christ, you would do it for free, 10 times more hours than you are actually doing it, and you would make sure that you are way better at it than you are. That would be doing it for Jesus. So I actually believe two things. I believe that you are partially doing it for Jesus, me too, partially. And then you are partially doing it for yourself because you need to belong. You want to be a part of something. You like the community. None of these reasons outside of doing it for Jesus are bad. They're actually all good because you are a human being and God gave you that human life and it needs a certain level of community and affirmation. So I am not saying those things are bad, but what I am saying is don't ever tell me that you're doing it just for Jesus as an excuse for low performance. Okay? So let's not do that. So you get this type of thing, and it needs to be found out and discovered immediately so that you can build the person up. Now, when I'm on stage and I'm talking like this, I sound like Jason was saying, I think he kind of was trying to warn you. He's like, he's aggressive. I'm not. When I work with people, they don't consider me aggressive at all. They actually consider me very docile and open to them, but absolutely convicted, and they know entirely where they stand with it, okay? So I do, when I'm on stage, for the purpose of education, draw these things out in a theatrical way. I want to just be clear that I'm not wanting anyone to misinterpret that with the delicacy of the human heart in a conversation. But it's also not the compromise of the principle in the conversation. And also, it's not a naivete that you walk around with that will get you in trouble. So I'll give you another example of naivete. Well, I don't know if it's naivete. I just know that I have a lot of priest friends, okay? And one of my priest friends was new to a particular parish, and they would have confessions on Saturday. And it was just like an open church like this, and there'd be one priest standing there, one priest standing there, one priest standing there, one priest standing there, and people kind of like not in a very organized way. And he was like, I can tell that they want a little privacy here, and everybody's just standing in front of the other person doing this, and you can semi-hear. So he bought a screen, so he could stand behind the screen. Guess what happened? The other three priests had nobody go to them, and everybody went to the priest behind the screen. The line was enormously big until the woman in the front office told him he's not allowed to have the screen and took it away from him. Can anyone here give me a good reason for that? Can anyone give me a bad reason for that? Yes. And whether we like it or not, there are people in your parish right now who are actually trying to do the opposite of save souls. They're trying to take them away from the possibility of salvation with a smile on their face so that they look good in what they're doing, and we are naive to believe that it's not the case. Fire every one of them on Monday when you go home. For me, and for my family, and for my kids who go into that parish who are undermined by your staff and trying to prevent people from going to heaven while you're working hard to do it and you don't even know what's happening. Why? Usually because they're pretty good with money. And you're worried that we might lose some parishioners if they're fired. You won't lose one. If you have a parishioner that leaves because you fired the person that should be fired in your office that hasn't been fired yet, and by the way, you know who it is. And it's not just because of that. Sometimes it's just because they're not effective. Because when you walk in and you're supposed to be greeted by somebody who's welcoming you into the church for the first time in RCIA, it sounds a little like this. What? You're like, oh, I'm here for RCIA? Yeah, well, just sit down there. Okay, you know what? You can be in the mailroom, but you can't be here. That's not where that job works. Because it runs against salvation of souls. It pushes people away. I would be giving this literal exact same talk if I was talking to a franchise group of people that are running a fitness center. Okay? I don't know how to not have that talk with you as parish priests because it happens everywhere. But the stakes are so much higher with you, aren't they? They're so much higher. Like, the idea of spiritual father, my son, as you, I'm sure, deeply desired a family. And that's, you know, we've very much learned in the church, that's like a prerequisite, actually, to become a good priest, right? And that you're foregoing this naturalness to you. But as you, that understanding of like the flock that he has, the spiritual children, that's such a real thing. I can tell you right now, if somebody threatened my kids physically, they would not stand a chance. Okay? At least to my efforts, they would not stand a chance. If they threatened their souls, it's even worse. I know you're the same way, but are you allowing that to come out? Do you allow your priesthood as a leader to have a side to it that would be righteously ferocious? What is righteously ferocious? It is not to be attacking, but like righteously ferocious would be like if you approach a wolf next to pups and it snarls at you, you're like, that's ferocious. What is it saying? Don't harm who I protect. There's got to be a little bit of that element which says, I will not let somebody harm the souls of the people in this parish because I have a mission. And when I stand in front of Christ, I know this is a regular just father, okay? Like I think about this as my dad, as a dad. Like when I'm in front of Jesus, I I know what I want that line to be, by the way. When we're all in line and like Jesus is up there as a judge and and like people are sweating it out next to me, I want to be able to say, oh yeah, this is awesome. Why? Well, because I know him. He's my friend. I talk to him every day. And I'm in good with his mom. Like, that's what I want, right? And I know that if I have that impression of myself, but if I walk up and he says to me, hey, I know you think you're all awesome because of all that praying and stuff, but when you saw this threat in the life of your children and you just let it happen because you didn't want the conflict, what do you have to say about that? I don't want that conversation. I want, whether I won or lost that battle, to be able to say, I gave it my best effort. And by the way, since my kids are all adults, that sail has shipped, and I already probably give myself a low grade anyway, but I am now trying to work it out anyway, right? This doesn't end throughout all of our life. We're not perfect in this, but we have to identify it, see it, and then go after it. So when we have somebody that is not effective or running against the grain, they do not have the right to be there. Oh, I've actually owned part of an airline. Can you imagine if I was like in a meeting and I was like, hey, I know my friend Bob is an alcoholic and he's flying the planes and stuff, but I really like Bob. And he's so nice. And I don't want to hurt Bob's feelings. Am I doing the right thing for the passengers or the right thing for Bob? No, I fire Bob. There is a point where our loyalty or our fear of conflict or whatever these things might be is going to get in the way of what that mission actually is. And we have to stop and make it super simple here. We're trying to save souls. We're trying to win the Super Bowl. That's not a part of it. That is a distraction for what it is we're trying to do, or that's getting in the way of what we're trying to do. How many of you have had the experience of there was somebody you probably should have fired, by the way, whether it was in your priesthood or previous part of your life or anything else, and then when you did, you were amazing, you were surprised at how well it went afterwards? Raise your hand if you've experienced that before. It is absolutely an amazing thing, especially like, oh my gosh, have you ever had to, and I want to be very clear, you're not answering this question just as it pertains to your priesthood, but you're answering this question as it pertains to life, because now nobody can actually wonder what's going on when you're answering the question. You've got ambiguity here, right? How many times was that person the type of person who made you feel like if you fired them, they'd take others with them or it would hurt the organization? Raise your hand. See, if you have anyone in your organization that makes you feel that way, fire them immediately and know there will be no consequence. That is the person in particular who is positioning themselves in a way because of their vulnerability where when they leave, everybody looks at you and says, why didn't you do that earlier? Okay? There are signs. You see these signs. I am actually not a big firer guy. It might sound like I am. I'm actually not. In my organizations, we have less than 2% voluntary turnover. So people like being there, and we win all of the culture awards and all that kind of stuff. The reason that's important is because I know I'm being so harsh on this sort of thing. But when you build a culture that has a proper expectation and people know what the mission is and they understand what your standard is for it, you will attract people to it who want to be a part of that mission the right way, and you will not attract people who are cowards. And the people who are trying to undermine you are generally cowards. They only go where there are weak leaders, because they think they can overpower them. They generally don't go where there are strong leaders. And where there is a strong leader, there are strong followers or strong sub-leaders, and like an antibody, they attach to something that doesn't fit the culture and they kick it out. But in a bad culture, good things are kicked out, and they don't work there. So this thing is real. I also want to just say this about it. So we're talking about the mission statement. A mission statement is only made possible, by the way, if it has clarity. Like, let's say if you were a bank, and this is the mission statement, to safeguard your money with convenient access and low fees. That's pretty good, right? What if we added, to safeguard your money with convenient access, low fees, and we will honor the spirit of not trying to rob your money? You would be like, okay, hadn't thought about that, now I am. So when we put all these extra words into a simple mission statement, it makes you wonder, what problems exist here? Are these things really problems that we have to mention them? Like, if you just simply said, I'm going to just make sure that I go to work every day on time, That's probably good, but like if you had to write down, I'm going to wake up and then shower and brush my teeth and then put deodorant on, this is an excessive list. The list is go to work, right? So we need to make sure that we don't put things in there that are unnecessary or things that reveal things that we shouldn't have revealed that make no sense. Okay. All right. The next thing is how do you do this? How do you lead effectively when you're leading any organization or group or parish? There is a lack of understanding from most people on the outside of the formation of what a priest goes through as far as what priests are formed in. And there's an over-assumption that priests are formed in leadership. Okay, and having just watched my son go through seminary, this is not something that is heavily instituted, okay? And so how in the world would you expect somebody who is, imagine a person who is trained heavily in leadership but knows nothing of theology or philosophy, and they have to jump into your role as a priest. Can you imagine how inept they would be? Okay, they'd be entirely inept in a reverse circumstance. But you have to take that time. You have to have the time that is required for a priest to go through that formation process in so many different ways. But then if you don't draw a straight line to the actual specific traits of what it means to be in leadership, you can't actually have them. Another example. If you're an all-around general athlete, you're just kind of generally athletic, and now you enter into a new sport, if you don't have the specific muscles that new sport requires or drills down, your general athleticism isn't going to work out. And you need to learn the specific techniques, even if you're generally coordinated. So leadership is like that, which is to say, most of you probably have some sort of natural leadership athleticism, but this is to train it up, to get it specifically to what we need to do. And interestingly enough, there are topics that I made assumptions that priests knew because of my regard for the priesthood, which is very high, by the way. And because of that regard, I was afraid to, even when invited, challenge them to new things until their vulnerability and their holiness revealed, no, don't. I need this. Help me with that. And it kind of gave me, through their own permission, okay, the ability to speak to some of them. And I want to talk about the cardinal virtues because this is one of the biggest ones. I was surprised that if you were to say to most priests, tell me about the cardinal virtues, they have very little to say. More to say about the theological virtues, but not very much about the cardinal virtues. And the catechism is beautiful on the cardinal virtues. When I build a company and when I work with leaders, this is what I go after right away. Now, you will see in Leading Giants, that book, the Influence Mastery Handbook, that book is really heavy on the leadership aspect of the cardinal virtues and then the transcendentals and how they actually build culture within an organization. And it is written to a secular audience, but you will see Catholic thinking throughout it, even though it's not a Catholic book. And I am not a theologian. The only like real Catholic thing I ever wrote was this book called The Fountain of Youth on Confession, and that's because I'm very qualified as a sinner. That is my qualification to write the book. 56,000 copies sold in 2 months. I think it's the number 3 Catholic book sold for the year last year, even though it came out in the fall. So you can get copies for very, very little. I know somebody who would even send you 1,000 copies for free if you wanted that to happen. And I'm not supposed to say that, by the way, because the regular marketing plan with the other priests, you're here. So this only applies to people that are actually here. If you want 1,000 copies, or if you're like, actually, our parish is 2,000, I want 2,000 copies for free, I know a guy who can give you 2,000 books for free, up to a certain amount that I already bought and own. Okay? And by the way, we are selling them, just so you know. I don't have to give them away. We're selling them, but I did this as a labor of love for the salvation of souls. And so the whole point is I just want the books out there. But if you want to have Jason contact me, I'll send you whatever your parish needs and just distribute them. It comes with a movement, by the way. It's called the 12-Men movement. It's a super simple movement. You don't want a movement where there's meetings and fees and everything your parish is involved. This is what it is. Get 12 guys in your parish to take their families to confession 12 times a year and get 12 more guys to do it. That's it. 12 by 12 by 12. Super simple mission, okay? Anyway, I don't know where I was then before I talked about the book. Cardinal virtues. Thank you very much. Cardinal virtue 5, memory. Kidding. Okay. The cardinal virtues, as you know, the word cardinal is the Latin word for hinge, meaning all other virtues hinge upon them. The Catechism of the Catholic Church calls prudence, the base level one, the charioteer of all of the virtues. Prudence, so there's two things that I tell everybody when they come into business with me. I say, there's two things I want you to know. First of all, the key to success is, and this is irrefutable, doing what you don't feel like doing. Anybody who's been around life long enough realizes, you know what? I can't actually argue that. The key to success is doing what you don't feel like doing. But the most powerful thing in the world is a decision. It's more powerful than anything else. And you might say, well, God is the most powerful thing in the world. Yes, very true. But as it applies to you, what if you make a decision to not accept his love? You have somehow, in the strangest way, committed this sin against the Holy Spirit and usurped your ability to be involved in the power of God. We're actually subject to God's power, but in a different way, right? But the most powerful thing in the world is a decision. And a decision is actually prudence. Prudence is the mastery of decision-making. That's what it is. It's just not talked about anymore. When people talk about prudence, it's kind of like this Poindexter investor who's not, going to make a prudent decision. That's what they look. But you know what? It's like a Marvel character. Prudence is intensely strong. Words never said. You know what I loved about working in that company? No one could make a decision to save their life. You know why I think I'd like to hire him? Bad decision maker. No. The first thing begins with a decision. Okay? It is making a decision. So I have always disliked, when I was young, people would give me advice that I didn't know how to take. I wanted steps. They would say things like, you got to believe to achieve. You need conviction. You ever hear that one before? Especially in a circumstance where you just don't believe. And I was always like, but I don't. And they would repeat it. Well, you need to believe to achieve. I was like, yeah, no, I still don't believe, okay? There's actually steps to believe to achieve. And I'm not talking about theological faith. I'm talking about human faith, right? When it comes to prudence, and this is very Thomistic, but because I am not a theologian, okay, I have taken all of the Thomistic philosophies and brought them down to business language, which is very small words, speaking slowly, just so you know, okay? And the first step in prudence, now you'll hear things like command if you are a Thomist, you'll know these, but the first thing is to desire what is good. These first three steps are so simple that they sound like they're maybe not useful, but they're unbelievably powerful. It's like packing a snowball at the top of a mountain and then pushing it down. I believe most of you have actually mastered what I'm about to say here. So I'm not about to talk about the cardinal virtues for you. Now, you will know whether or not there's a gap in your own life. I know for me, even when I give this talk, I'm re-listening to myself going, yeah, got to work on that more too. So that self-reflection is important. But I'm doing this for you to help build within your organizations so that they become good at this, okay? How many times have you had a problem in your organization because somebody made a bad decision and now you had to fix it, right? This will happen on a routine basis. So we want the people that we lead to be masters of decision-making. The reason it's called leading giants is that I want you to be a giant who leads giants, okay? Because when you lead giants, you have this tremendous gift of being able to accept greater responsibility, but having less responsibilities. And that is the key to influence and power, is that reverse formula. So the first thing is desire what is good. If a person doesn't desire what is good, nothing good comes from anything. In a relationship, if you don't desire what is good, can the relationship be good? No. Leading people, if you don't desire what's good, it cannot be. You can't be an Uber driver and not desire what is good and have a good outcome, okay? You have to desire what is good. The second thing is to know what is real. So even if you desire what is good, if you don't know what is real, you can't actually get anywhere when people live outside of reality, okay? So if you bake cookies, what is good? That you bake delicious cookies that are attractive and you sell them at a reasonable price. That'd be pretty simple, I would say, okay? So you want to try a new cookie recipe, you put it together, I bring it to the room here, and I say, well, what'd you think? And Father's like, hated your cookies, man. Well, what'd you think, Father? Hated them too. What about you? Hated them more than they hated them. And I look at all of you and I go, well, you're tasting them wrong. Okay? I don't know reality. I am in denial about it, and I cannot possibly make good decisions. Okay? So the first thing is desire what is good. The next one is know what is real. This is also like, it's the sub-virtue of understanding circumstance, right? To be aware of the circumstance. And then the third one is to act upon what is good. Know or desire what is good, know what is real, and pursue what is good. See, a lot of times in leadership, we're like, I desire what is good. I want everybody to go to heaven. I truly do want to do that. What is the reality? Well, the reality is people don't show up to stuff. The reality is that, I don't need a parishioner to tell me that person I have in charge and that is offensive because I'm offended by them. The reality is, and here's where it really gets in, the numbers don't work. You have a leading indicator, by the way, in your parish, don't you? You know where I'm going with this? I couldn't hear, Father. The leading indicator is super simple. I love this. I love it when something can be so simple. I love simple. How often are people supposed to do a confession according to the precepts of the church? Once a year, technically once a year if they're in the state of mortal sin, but come on already. We can just go with once a year, right? Okay? Are you supposed to receive the Eucharist in the state of mortal sin? No. Now, by the way, one thing I want to just be clear that I'm not saying or even approaching is that you would make the judgment of who, or like the public, I'm not talking about Nancy Pelosi level stuff here. I'm talking about like normal behavior, okay? But we can know that if a parish has 1,000 families and therefore maybe 3,000 or 4,000 people that are confession age, okay, that in order to get a D- and scoot into heaven, God doesn't work this way. I'm using earthly terms and I'm also trying to be funny, but you didn't even laugh. No, thank you. No, and you're trying to scoot in to heaven with a D-, that you should have 100 people in line at confession every single week. Just to like scrape it up to a D and have them go twice, you need 200 people in confession every week. But in most parishes, you've got 13, and it's a repeat 12 every other week. Now, I do understand the enormity of this on a human level and a spiritual level. I do. So I have total empathy for, like, if I were a priest and I had to enter into that situation, the cross that I would be carrying to make a change in this. But it is a necessary cross to carry. Because you have the most tremendous gift from Jesus Christ through his church that anyone could have as a parish priest. You can know how good you're doing at it. Did you get your 3 S's? No. But you're thrown in circumstances that probably preceded you that you're trying to correct. So it's not like, you're getting graded exactly on this math because there's an enormity of change. There's all sorts of things that are about this. Anybody, in other words, who would go in and go, well, listen, I know Father so-and-so has this going on, and I counted the number of people in confession, so he's a good priest or a bad priest, is like insane. That person has a problem. But we can work through the reality of those numbers so that you have a target, right? Because let me just ask you a question. If your mission is to save every single soul there, and you have 1,000 people walking up for communion every single week, but a collective 50 that go to confession, can you already know if you're getting that done? The only thing you might be able to hide behind is their lack of culpability, so the strategy might be, I won't tell them about it so that they're not culpable. But now you are, for like 950 people. I don't think I'd want to make that trade. I'd put it back on them. Okay? So we can know that. That's a challenge, isn't it? That's a hard one. Because it also extends into a very practical thing like, how would I hear 200 confessions? I know when I see my son, on the day that he looks most exhausted, it's the day that he heard most confessions. I mean, I hear confessions all day at work with employees about what's going on in their lives that gets in the way of them doing their jobs. That exhausts me, and I can't even absolve them of their sins. And also, I know what it's like as a parishioner going to confession and being frustrated by certain things. Like there's like 15 minutes here. There's like 15 people in line. And really, she needs to talk for 15 minutes. It's not spiritual direction right now. It's like confession. Well, that's got to drive you crazier than it drives me when you're in there. Because you're trying to be so pastoral and so good and so kind, and you want that person to come back, and you know that you want to listen. And so, there's this challenge that's got to be so real. I think about that from your perspective quite often. The enormity of the time that you have to spend there. But just let me ask you a question. Is there anything you're doing that's more important than hearing somebody else's confession? If what you're actually trying to accomplish is get people to heaven, and you're in some meeting, as opposed to hearing somebody's confession, I don't think that. So that's why I want to talk about this. The more you build your organization, the more you expand your influence, I said this briefly, but I want to talk about it more. The more that you need to shed responsibilities and raise your level of responsibility. As an entrepreneur, every time I start a company, I do everything to start off. And it's ridiculous. I got to get somebody to do this. I got to get somebody to do that. I got to get somebody to do this. And I'm shedding responsibilities, which is great, but I'm carrying my responsibility. What I said, just because there was a bunch of guys that I worked with in one of the companies, and they were friends of mine for many years, so I used this analogy. I don't know if I'd use it in all contexts, but I said I was trying to teach them the power of delegation. I said there are some things, however, you cannot delegate. You do not delegate somebody kissing your wife. You don't do that. Okay? So what is that for you? It's the sacraments. You're the one. You're the only one. You're the only one that can do them. So in business, what I always tell people is if you're doing something that somebody else can do, have them do it. No matter how good at it you think you are, there's somebody better. There is a caveat. You have to make sure that they are doing it in line with what your mission is. If they do it against your mission, then it's very destructive. But find somebody to do everything you're doing so you can do the thing that you do. And for leaders, it's influence. For leaders, it's mostly influence. It is to be in front of people, influencing them. That's what I have to do. I don't know how to make an Excel spreadsheet. But when I sold my last company, the private equity company that bought it, and they own 350 companies, they said, you are the most advanced technological company that we've bought, okay? And I don't know anything about technology, but I made sure that I hired the best people, and they knew a lot about it, and they did it. And literally, it'd be funny. They'd be doing these, development workshops and Excel workshops for employees, and I'd walk in, and I'm like, very important stuff. They always laugh because they don't know. I don't know how to do that either. Okay. But my job isn't to do that. My job is to influence. If you called the White House and Trump answered the phone and said, "White House, can I help you?" "Oh yeah, tours at 3:00. I'll be here for it." You'd be like, "Don't you have something else that you got to do here?" Yeah, I'm working on a spreadsheet. I'm doing some of the budget, and I'm just kind of working on the spreadsheet. No, somebody gives him the spreadsheet, and I'm arranging travel arrangements for Netanyahu because we're going to get together. Okay? Does he and make sure you pick out the pastry. No, you just sit in front of him and you work with him. Wouldn't it be amazing if the only thing that you ever had to do, this is a fantasy, okay, but the only thing you ever had to do was wake up, hear confessions, say Mass, and provide some spiritual direction? If you could exclusively do that, that would be amazing. The productivity inside your parish would be unbelievably intense for that to happen. But the only way it could happen is if you had a great team around you that was working toward the mission that you're working toward. I know I'm throwing a lot of stuff out there pretty quickly. And I have 35 seconds before a big hook is going to pull me off the stage here, and we take our break, and then we're going to come back. And I want to open it up to a lot of Q&A on this sort of thing. And I don't mind if there's challenges to it. Dave, I don't know how that applies here. I think this is an ignorant assumption there, or maybe your assumption is okay, but it's lacking this. Then let's talk about it, because we can work through these things in order for you to be effective in what you do. And by the way, I want to just say this, super important. You are effective in what you do. And the very fact that you accepted your call the way you accepted your call, and that you're serving souls the way that you serve those souls in a way that cannot be done without what you do and your presence and the enormity of the strain that you have on you and the complexity of the circumstances that can take place and the things that you have sacrificed in life to do what it is that you're doing, I don't mind telling you that I acknowledge the fact that you have an additional burden that most people do not have, and that is an opportunity for supernatural grace at levels like you and believe. It's like heroic virtue. Cardinal virtues, fine. You, when you apply these things, have heroic virtue because your calling is so much above other people. And I say all these things with that acknowledgement. So let's come back after the break. We'll dive into maybe some Q&A, and I've got more blanks to fill in here too. Okay, so let me just start off by asking if there are any questions or thoughts or comments on some of the things we talked about. I had a couple of good conversations just during the break about certain ideas and, the specifics of a particular, circumstance that you're in. Anything like that coming up that you have a question about or a comment? Yes.
Twice during this conference, we've been told, just fire them.
Yeah.
But if you listen to the human resources departments of your diocese, it takes a lot more than just your desire to get rid of someone who's not doing their job. So from your perspective, how would you go about doing that?
Whiskey or bourbon? I would say probably bourbon. I'm kidding. Yeah, so listen, when we were talking about the politics of a diocese or an archdiocese, I'm definitely outside my pay grade because I don't know of the full restrictions that you have there. What I would say, though, is that generally speaking, conviction about the circumstance and need will sell the day in most circumstances like that. To say, listen, I know you want me to keep this person, but they're entirely running against our mission. They're hurting us. This is not going to go well. Now, they might have a protocol for you for how you can actually enter into the firing process easier, which would be to have a certain sit down, to document it, do all that kind of stuff. Just get ahead of that process and follow the process in order to be able to do it. But to me, the only thing that I could provide an advice in is worth a fight. It's just absolutely worth it. It's like, listen, you're asking me to do a job, and I need to do the job. I need the right people on the team to do the job. I don't have those right people to do the job. I can't do it if I don't have the authority to do the job. And I would stay in that discussion as long as required. I would do that. And I know that there's a burden to it, but I would stay in it. Great question. Yes. But I love this. Normally I go to a conference, I'm like, I can't remember his name. I'm like, Father?
I guess, what about working with someone who, their personality is definitely a barrier, and you want to work with that? There's maybe hopefully goodwill, good intent that yes, they want to change, they want to do better in that role, but definitely there's something that's ingrained within them, and it's how do you accompany that person to change in that right direction? And then I guess it's kind of where it's giving them that time, but then also maybe recognizing, okay, their personality is just not the right position, and then that's when you do cut them loose.
So I can tell from how you ask that question that the person you're thinking of needs to go. Okay? You worked so hard in laboring that question that I have seen that look on my own face besides others, and that person has to go. So there's a couple of different things. You don't hire a pilot. It's a great analogy. I actually am a pilot. I don't fly very much anymore, and never commercially. We fly for fun, right? You don't hire a pilot that doesn't know how to fly in hopes that they'll learn how to fly and give them enough time because they have a good personality. Okay? But that's how we do most of the jobs that we have. You don't do that. You hire them because they have a certain amount of aptitude. They have a certain amount of already established skill. They're qualified for the role in a particular way. And now, of course, you can increase their responsibilities as they do grow and learn, just like somebody can go from a type rating of, a twin prop to a jet. Okay? But you don't start with a person that can't fly and put them in a role where they need to fly. And if you made the decision poorly, or somebody else made it for you before you got there, you just have to do it. You just have to, listen, this is not mean. If you asked me to come up here and sing opera, and then you did not like the way it sounds, that's your fault for making me sing opera. Okay, and by the way, not only are you saving yourself from the frustration of hearing something horrible, but everybody else around you is glad that you fired me from singing opera. And I can guarantee that that person, see, have you ever had that thing where you're like, they try to convince me that everybody else here likes them, but I can't stand them. I bet everybody else doesn't like them either. You are almost always right. If you are like, this person is hard to be around for me, they're hard to be around. Okay? And you're solving the problem by not having them be there. That's hard. See, this is the thing about it. Like, this is hard work. What you have ahead of you to put the right people on the right seats of the bus and then have certain people get off the bus, the first thing we have to do is we have to separate that from whether or not it's Catholic or not. It is not a Catholic principle to leave people in a job they can't do and block the mission. That is not a Catholic. By the way, it's not even a Catholic principle to them. It's cruel to them. If they are in a role that they can't do, and then you're constantly frustrated with them and they get nothing out of it, they're not happy, by the way, which is one of the reasons that they become very, very difficult to work with, because they know they can't do the job, and now they start lying about all the reasons they can't do the job, and they have excessive excuses because they're in self-preservation land. So this is just a part of life, and it's a good part of life. I mean, it's a way worse thing. You ever see American Idol? Okay, you would have people in the early part of that show, especially when the show was newer, that would not be able to sing Happy Birthday. And it was so bad that 10 million viewers turned the TV down or off, and the judges would say, no, this is not your thing. And they would look at the judges and say, you're wrong. I will be the next American Idol. Mom and dad walk down the hallway, and their second grade kids work in the hallway, and mom is like, oh my gosh, I have a Picasso. And dad's like, it's not that good. Okay? If you constantly have somebody like affirming you in something you can't do, and you think that you're doing a good thing for that person to have them walk down a trap, it's like the emperor's new clothes. You know, they are naked in front of the rest of the people witnessing how bad they are at something because you walked them down that path. So we have to free that person from their bad circumstance, free their coworkers from having to work with a bad circumstance, and liberate the parishioners from something blocking the mission. And it is actually that simple, but it is not easy. And there's a huge difference between simplicity and easiness. And when we confuse the two, we stay away from the simple, and we move to the easy, okay, which leads to the greater complex. So we have to be careful when we have that happen. It's a really great question, but I already know. I can know. This is only through repetition. When you've done this for 35 years, you were like a facial expression into about what you were going to ask, and I was ready to say fire him. I still needed to listen to make sure I wasn't getting it wrong, but like that intuition shows up right away. Okay. Yes.
In a post-COVID world, I'm noticing more and more this mentality of this work-from-home mentality. And they get their little box, they get their yeses, but they do it remotely.
Yeah.
Now, it's my personal belief that you just cannot do this job without physical human contact. I think you need that personal touch. You need to be present in the parish, in the offices, whether you're the secretary, whether you're communications director, especially if you're clergy. Could you speak to that? Because I'm just seeing more and more employees who think that, well, I did my job, I hit my quota, I did what you asked me to do, but I can do this from my living room versus I don't need to be in the office.
So let me answer that question by asking a question, and then I'll get into it. It's a great question, by the way. And this is a universal question outside of parishes and just workplaces. What is the thing that's not happening effectively for people to be in the state of grace and saved because they're working at home? And by the way, there could be a very practical answer to this. I'm not challenging it. Like, my answer is not going to be, well, let them work at home, just simply like that. But that's the question we have to ask. Is we have to say, well, So here's why. This question came up a lot. And in my own companies, when we were just about to move one of our offices where we had like 180 employees to a place that would hold 300 because our census was going up. COVID hits, And all of a sudden, we're in that building for 6 years more. The number of employees has gone up, but the need for office space has not gone up. And I immediately had all sorts of fractions on sides of the several different companies that I was running at the time, where people were like, this is ridiculous, everybody has to come in, da-da-da-da-da. And other people were like, this is amazing, nobody has to come in. And you know what? On this, the truth is somewhere in the middle. It specifically has to do with the job. And now what a lot of people do is they say, well, we can't do that because if we did that for them, we'd have to do it for this person. That is a complete misapplication of that too. If we have to do it for you, we have to do it for everyone. No. Like I had sometimes like high-performing people where I give them certain privileges and somebody goes, well, that's not fair. If you do that for them, you have to do it for everybody. And I go, hey, listen, I treat everybody completely equally on this. And as soon as you perform exactly at that level, I will give you exactly what they got, and I will treat you exactly like them. Okay? And that just, okay? So in this particular circumstance, I stop and I ask, well, what? What is it that they're doing? Well, they're a programmer. They're a developer. Stay at home. Got bad breath anyway? Nobody likes you. Yeah? You can program at home and have nobody like you. That'll work out fine. Okay? So, but now I watch their programming and their development, and it's 50% of the performance. Got to come in. See that? So the application is that. Now, clearly, you know, you can't have an air traffic controller work flexible hours at home. Okay? Nor can you a pilot. So I would always look at these very specifically and very individually and say, does it apply? And frankly speaking, half of the people who irritate everybody else but they're good administrators, keep them at home. What a gift. What a great COVID gift that we have, that we can have the efficiency but not the irritation. By the way, there are some irritating people who are abundantly holier than me. This is not about better or worse. It just has to do with like personalities, okay? So let them stay at home. But then there are others that need to interact, okay? And they need to interact in a way that, this is one of the things. Here's who you don't have stay in the office or keep in their role. Somebody who thinks they have more power and authority than they do. One of the things that drives me crazy is when, I got a friend, okay, who knows somebody who is friends with an archbishop. And he was on the building committee for a parish that was interviewing people to build a new church. And the bishop had gotten there and was only there for maybe 2 years. And the bishop that preceded him was famous. Notoriously famous. So there were some issues. He had to take over. My friend was on the building committee, and the building committee had a great opportunity to actually have Duncan Stroik. Do you know that name? Duncan Stroik design and be the builder for the parish church. That's like having Michael Jordan in his prime on your basketball team. How do you even get that? The parishioners decided to not go with him because he's not the kind of guy you can have a beer with. That was the reasoning. So my friend happened to be at a luncheon with the bishop the day that they were going to officially sign the papers for the architect. And the bishop walked up to my friend and said, hey, friend of Dave, I know you, of course, from the diocese, but I did not know that you were on the building committee at so-and-so, but I saw your name on there and I saw the list of architects. I am so eager to have Duncan Stroik build that church. It'll be the most beautiful thing that has been built here in 50 years. This will be amazing. And I said, my friend said, well, you better call Father immediately because they're about to vote on somebody else. And he said, well, that's not supposed to be happening. My friend shows up to the meeting where they're going to sign, and the parish priest comes up to my friend looking like a ghost and says to my friend, the Archbishop called me today. And he, by the way, has such great respect for the Archbishop. And so to him, it was like the greatest call ever, right? And the second he called, he said to me, he goes, I saw Duncan Stroik on your list. And he said, don't worry, Archbishop, we will never let him build it. And the Archbishop said, what are you talking about? He's my pick. I want you to build it. And he said, are you serious? And he said, well, just so you know, your priest secretary called me 3 months ago and said, I'm calling on behalf of the Archbishop in his name to tell you that he does not want Duncan Stroik to ever build a church in this diocese, ever. And you're forbidden to work with him. That direct undermining can happen to you in your parish. And I want to tell you who does it. Hi, Father. How are you? Here's your coffee. That's who's doing it. Now, that person is oftentimes not doing it, but you can't tell the difference. Okay? I just remember a story somewhere about somebody being betrayed by a kiss. This is the type of thing that happens, so we need to be smart about it and savvy about it. Oh, by the way, my email is dave@leadinggiants, so there's 2 G's, dave@leadinggiants.com. If anybody wants those books, I am sincere about that. We'll get them shipped out to you. Okay, any other questions? And by the way, I know I answered, didn't answer, because there isn't an exact answer for it. Okay, yes?
Switching from personnel to programs, it's great. Clarify with mission. Save souls. As Catholics, we save souls through the sacraments. I'm a priest because of the sacraments. The sacraments are incredible. Most sacramental prep programs do not save souls. Most of them prepare for sacraments, and then 20 years later, when they have a conversion experience, maybe the grace of the sacraments are not finally saving their soul. How do you deal with that sort of dichotomy? And you're a Catholic, so you kind of understand this. What is your thought on programs, particularly with sacramental prep?
I love that question. Love that question. Okay, so for me, I was born and raised a cradle Catholic. And even in grade school, I went to Mass every day, even though they took Mass away from the rest of the students. For whatever reason, like 3 of us, I don't even remember making the decision. I just kept going. I would skip class to go. And at the time, I was very unimpressed by myself. As I've gotten older, I was actually quite impressed by my young self doing that. But didn't think anything of it when it was happening. And then I went to high school, and there was this weird thing called girls. And I kind of moved away from my faith. Anyway, I had a conversion experience back when I was 27 years old. So I was kind of that person who was in the midst of all these things, just like you're saying, and then you have that actual experience of conversion and sincerity later on. There are a couple of different things that I can tell you, having gone through that, but more importantly, from the leadership perspective, what we're talking about. I want to come back to confession on this, and I'm not fixated on confession. I am fixated on knowing how we're doing. I'm fixated on the Eucharist, because my faith is fixated on the source and summit with Jesus Christ. And the more that I know him in the Eucharist, the more that I will know him in heaven. I cannot wait for that day. I can't get past that door without confession. That's why I talk about doors. It drives me, when people are like, you know what, all we're going to do is we're just going to help everybody love Jesus. By the way, I must confess to you, I'm a daily communicant. Hey, bring me back to your question, because I'm about to take a little tangent. I'm notorious for this, and sometimes I need a reminder. This is a true story. I go to daily Mass. I did not go this morning, and I want to tell you why. Because I stumbled in from an Uber at about 2:30 in the morning. Not too impressive, is it? It's 100% true, by the way. Now you're all going, oh, that changes my perception. Except that it was because I woke up at 1:30 in the morning with a migraine, which I never get. And either my wife or I had Excedrin, which is the only thing that can stop it. And if I kept that migraine going, I knew I wouldn't be able to get up. And so I go down to the front desk, and there's no anything anywhere. So they say, well, you can walk 30 minutes to this place or not. So I take an Uber, and I go get migraine medicine. I come back, and it takes me several hours to just fall back asleep. And so I had to measure against going to Mass or being able to speak effectively with you. And I made that decision. Why is this a good analogy? Because when I told you the truth, which is that I stumbled back in, and I was stumbling, I had a migraine, at 2:30 in the morning, that left you with an impression, didn't it? And that impression runs against the message that I'm trying to send you because it makes me look pretty hypocritical. But it was true. So which is why when a good priest gives a good homily, like just recently maybe on Melchizedek and the priesthood, and that all of us receive that priesthood in our baptism, and they even go to say it's not about man or woman. We all receive that priesthood, so the priesthood isn't about gender. It's true. It's theologically accurate and very dangerous thing to say in today's day and age, isn't it? Full stop. At the end of that, you have a certain amount of your parishioners who heard that message to use it against you and say, you even said that women can be priests. So this is where it is required for me to go beyond, and the reason I stumbled back in is because I had a migraine and I wanted to be here for you. As opposed to just leave you with something that is an ambiguous message that is running against my mission. And people do that all the time in homilies. This is a dangerous thing. I heard one time that Scott Hahn, who's a friend of mine, never criticizes or talks about a homily. Okay? I don't know if he also goes so far as to never even think the criticism or not. I try very hard not to do that. There are only times that I've ever done it is when I was with my kids and there was literally something that would have taken them away from the church. Usually it's something, back in Vatican II, and now, of course, there is no sin, so just love your neighbor, okay, that I would have to correct it. But otherwise, I just let it go. Most of the time, it's done innocently, but not without full thought. Sometimes, and we all know that people are doing it because they have a different agenda, but most of the time it's done innocently. We didn't even realize what we said and how it might have been taken. One of the chapters in the book I have is Think Like a Criminal. If you're going to be effective as a detective, you have to get in the mind of the criminal. We have to be in the mind of the parishioner, the mind of the person who we want to convert. I'm going to take this to the simplest point. My wife and I listen to Divine Office every morning and every night when we wake up or go to sleep. And you know one of the things that I love to hear is Zechariah, Canticle, when he says, and they will know of their salvation, how? By the forgiveness of their sins. You reflect upon the power of that. Jesus didn't come in and say, let me catechize you. Let me tell you you're a sinner, okay? And then let me tell you the 15 steps on how to follow me. He said, your sins are forgiven. We all know we have the burden of sin. We don't even need to be told. So when we let somebody know that that burden can be taken from them, if it is sincere, an amazing thing happens. So what we do is we end up intellectually evangelizing as opposed to evangelizing to the soul and to the heart. Now, by the way, I'm very linear. You can hear I'm talking, right? But there's an aspect of this that really matters, where our job, and I say our job because me as a father, your job, me now as a grandfather as well too, in a different role, but is to influence. That is why that book is called The Influence Guide, okay? It is to influence. Why are you giving a homily? So that the people you're giving the homily to take action. And if you're saying something that is like vanilla-ish, they won't take action. They will not take action. Do you know what is crazy about what you do as a priest? You have to, you hear this for how I'm saying it, you have to say a presumed insult in order to get your job done. You are a sinner. Bad. You need to go to confession because you sin. Now, you wouldn't say it that way, but that's the implication, that the only way that you can possibly get a person to go to confession is for them to actually admit that they are making mistakes, many of them grave mistakes that risk their salvation. There's a consequence in it. when I taught confirmation, and there were juniors when we taught confirmation in the archdiocese that I taught these confirmation kids, I did it for 7 years. There were many of them in the class. The confirmation was totally different. And this kind of goes to your question, like speaking to this, right? Confirmation was, they gave me the confirmation materials, and it was like, oh my gosh, we're going to talk about that? And then they're juniors in high school, and we're going to color a picture of a tree, and how is that God? Okay. I wonder if they're even ready for any of this. So I just started. And I said, I have a question for you. Who goes to heaven? And why? Good people. Nice people. People who don't judge. Okay. Do you know what values clarification? Remember that? It used to be popular in the 80s and 90s. So I'll get into that. The first church that I did this with, they were doing values clarification. Then I did it in a different church. Values clarification is where you would say to these teenagers, anybody who believes abortion is okay, sit on that side of the room. Anybody who believes that abortion is wrong, sit on that side of the room, and then you can tell us why. End. And I said, we can't do that. And there was like just these nasty people in charge. And they said, they recognized me immediately. And like, in other words, like, I believe in sin. And they did not want these kids to have the knowledge of sin. No. There was like, their job was to keep them in the dark and just get them through it. Very much like a teacher who does not care about the kids learning and just wants to push them through 8th grade to high school illiterate. And they said, no, we're doing values clarification. These kids have their own minds, their own thoughts. They have to think for themselves. They have to be able to decide whether or not these things are right or wrong. And I said, I think that is a great idea. We should do it. You've convinced me. Can I lead it? Sure. Okay. So we're going to start off, and I think it's a really good idea. So anybody who believes abortion is okay, you can go over there, and I'll tell you why you're wrong. Anybody here believes it's not okay, you can go over there, I'll tell you why you're right. Shuffle. One over there. Okay, good. Well, let me tell you why. And of course, they were very, very angry. But there's no way you can let them sit in their ignorance, right? So in the other group, I just started by saying, let's start with the basics. Who goes to heaven? People who are in the state of grace. What is required to be in the state of grace? And I talked about, invincible ignorance. I talked about the baptism of the desire. The Catholic Church is the only reasonable institution in the world in that, what if you were born and raised in a Muslim nation sincerely desiring to please God, but were never given the gospel at all, and the only time you saw a Bible was next to some kid that was a neighbor kid whose head was chopped off and put in a soccer field because he had a Bible, but you sincerely did want to believe in the true God, and you thought you were honoring God, and you died. Now you had 100% pureness of your heart to desire God. What would that be? That would be St. Paul on the road to Damascus, actually. Okay? It is, so in other words, I didn't come down with this, if you're not Catholic, like this message that wasn't so reasonable. I said, but to have universal, invincible ignorance would be rare for a person to actually have that. And you don't actually have it here. So I just walked through the basics. I said, how many people want to go to heaven? Anybody? And by the way, let's just let's take the message of Fatima and do as the children said. Let's just reflect for 5 or 10 minutes a day on heaven and hell and see how you behave, right? And I described heaven and hell. And I said, you literally need to know something, that it doesn't matter what you've done today. What we're talking about is more important than anything you ever did. And when you go to Mass on Sunday, that will be more important than anything you did. There's no question about it. There's not even a comparison at all. How many people raise their kids to work hard in school, learn their manners, and they teach them to eat right, all these habits in grade school so they can be in high school, and then they take them through all the athletic programs, and then they want them to get into a really good college so they can have a really good college degree, and then when they graduate from college, they make sure that they're saving for their future, and they do all this stuff, and they're just constantly thinking about all these things and intensely working on all these disciplines to make sure they've got their finances in order, and their health is in order, and blah, 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 so that they can retire at 65. For what? 20 years of pickleball? That's what you're doing that all for? Have you thought about what's after pickleball? And they're like, no, I haven't given it any thought. How did you not give that thought? Like, how did you miss the biggest thing that could possibly exist? And it's that. What your job is, by the way, I want to just say, I'm nobody to tell a Catholic priest what their job is. I'm talking to leaders right now, in the leadership capacity in you. It is your bishop to tell you what your job is, not me. I just want to be very, very clear about that. I will never overstep on that. But as a leader, our job is to influence people. So, I'm answering your question. It's a long answer. But if I am in the presence, does anybody know what Cutco knives are? I sold Cutco knives years ago when I was in college, and then I started running Cutco knife office. And you'd recruit all these college students in, and you'd teach them to go sell knives. Now, I remember coming from Big Bend, Wisconsin. At the time, in 1989, a set of knives was like $600. Now I think it's like $2,200 for the set of knives. Unbelievably expensive. The nicest car in my town was like a 4-year-old Ford Taurus, okay? So like when I showed my parents these knives, they were like, you are insane. And they did not buy any of them, okay? And you need to go to this rich place to get all, whatever. So I muscled my way through this, and they really were a great product. But then when I would recruit these college students, I was like, I watched the other people train college students on how to sell the knives, and this is how they did it. I thought it was fantastically ignorant. They would say, hey, these knives, you would think they would cost, and they'd like build up all the value and the quality. You would think they'd cost, this is in training before the kids actually know how much they cost, okay? You would think they'd cost $10,000, wouldn't you? And like everybody's looking at them like, I would have not thought that. But like the trainer is so ignorant, they're like, wouldn't you? And then, and I was watching this going, I would never do that when I train people. And then they go, but they're not even $5,000. And the people are like, no. And then he goes, they're only $611. And people were like, only? What are you talking about? So I knew that was real. So people weren't selling with me because they didn't see the value of it when I first started, because I was like, I don't know how to teach this. And then I was like, I'm going to get there. I know I can do this. I have to convince them. I know what is happening is they're leaving the training class. They're doing no appointments because they do not believe anyone will spend that money on knives. That is their problem, right? You can see this as an analogy in what you do, right? They don't have a belief in it. I have to get them to believe. So in that training class, I said, I'm going to tell you something. These knives are expensive like you wouldn't believe. Like through the roof. You're going to think there's no way anyone would buy them unless you're not sane. But they're $611 for a set of knives. Oh my gosh, that's expensive. I know, isn't it? The crazy thing is people buy them. But would anybody here, you'd like be nuts to buy, would anybody here buy these actually? Like, would you drop down $611 if you're hard-earned money for a set of knives? And they're like, no. And I was like, yeah, because you're in college. I said, does anybody here have a pair of basketball shoes? This is in 1990. Yeah. How much are your basketball shoes? $150? You've got to be kidding me, $150. That's insane. You paid $150? Yeah. Did your parents buy them for them? No. Well, you can wear them every day for the rest of your life, and they wear out, you're going to get a new pair for free, right? Because that was a Cutco warranty. No, they last like 4 months, man. And I was like, so you're like spending $600 on shoes? You got to be kidding me. And all of a sudden, all the athletes went, oh, I get it now. And I went down the line with every single thing that I could possibly think of. And then like the greatest one was a violin. How much was that? 15 grand? You got to be kidding me, okay? So everybody to their own, whether it was golf clubs or CDs back in the day, they were all spending that. And I said, what about a concert? Yeah, how much did that ticket cost? $200. Did your mom go with you? No. Would your mom spend $200 on that? No. Would your mom spend $200 or $150 on basketball shoes? No. So your parents think that you're crazy and you think they're crazy. Don't be them, be you, but sell to them from their perspective. And we ended up beating everybody in the country. So it was like this welcoming of something. So we have to just stay focused. We are not putting people in a catechism class. We are trying to save their soul. So we need to remind them of that in a compelling way. Some of you have that gift of influence verbally as great orators. And then some of you don't, and I don't know who that is. I just know that you're people, and that's true about people. So to the degree that you don't, you have others who do that. And there's so many great resources that can take place. But it has to have that full-on image mission to go, to get all the way there. The homily, and I'm not trying to make this about homiletics at all, because I'm not you've got certain forms that you need to go through and all that I'm not involved in, but I'm just talking about influence. A homily that is this: love your neighbor, without telling them what that actually means, doesn't move anyone to any action at all. Love your neighbor. I do. We've been having an affair and she's awesome. Okay, well, you've just doubled down on that one. And by the way, you keep telling me, Father, don't judge. So anybody who doesn't like it, they're the bad Christian, because they're doing the judging and I'm doing the loving. Okay? That is horrendous. So we need to define it. Okay? Holiness is amazing. It's important for us to all be holy. Holiness without sin it's just niceness. So what does it mean to be holy? Well, it might surprise you. Now, by the way, we need to be it is true that we should not be judgmental, but it is not true that we should not judge. You can't decide what to eat, where to go, what friends to have, what car to buy, if you don't judge. Judgmentalism is a very different thing. And reminding somebody of that is also very good. So when you bring that message to them of, I invite everyone into this. I'm a sinner, you're a sinner, we're sinners, we need salvation. Isn't it great that we're going to help? Now, here's another analogy. Christ used parables and analogies like crazy. If we want to get people past just entering the programs and into conversion, we need to speak their language. I spoke the language of everybody in that training class. You speak the language of everybody else in different ways. To say, I have a question. You literally say this to your parishioners in a meeting. It doesn't have to be homiletics, but in a meeting you say, I have a question for you. What would you think of a physician who is a cardiologist who smokes? By the way, what would you think of that? Stupid? I would say stupid. Okay. Would you say that person probably has a reduced amount of influence over their patients? Because you'd probably look at the person saying, well, smoking might not be that bad if my cardiologist does it. Maybe they're just overblowing it. You might use that because if you smoke, you want to self-justify, so you're looking for self-justification. Intellectually, you know it's not true, but you want to bring that in. So there's a weekend thing. But what would you think of the cardiologist who smokes, who is unwilling to tell his patients not to smoke because he would be a hypocrite because he smokes? What would you think of that person? Like a parent that says, well, who am I to tell my kids not to smoke pot and actually be promiscuous, because I did that when I was a teenager. I can tell you who you are, their parent, and it's none of their business what you did. Hey, mom, dad, did you do that? None of your business. I'm talking about you right now. Okay? The answer is so simple. Okay? And, who are you? You're their parent. You got to tell them. See, hypocrisy is something that you might even deal with, the fear of hypocrisy. In America, we love to take pot shots, human beings do everywhere actually, pot shots at other people. Well, at least I'm not as bad as them, or hypocrite, what do they think they're saying? I know they do it. So hypocrisy is different actually than propaganda, or I should say is the same as propaganda. See, the doctor who smokes is weak, okay? If the doctor smokes and he says, you shouldn't smoke, he's not a hypocrite. That is not hypocrisy. That's weakness. Hypocrisy is telling people things that you don't even believe to manipulate them. That's a hypocrisy. You don't believe in telling the truth, but you tell them they should tell the truth. Okay? You're going to be weak because you're human. I'm weak too. I sin, but I will still tell people not to sin. Okay? This is what we need to do. And if we can have analogies and we can say, listen, that's an analogy, by the way. That is the analogy. Say, I don't want to be the cardiologist that says, who am I to tell you if I know what you're doing is going to hurt you? You know what? I know it. Is a parent who loves their child? Do you love your child when your child just doesn't feel like brushing their teeth or ever taking a shower? And you're like, you know what? Let's just not let it. They don't have to. And all of a sudden they have horrible hygiene habits when they get older and people don't like being around them just because of a simple thing like hygiene, and the parent was unwilling to put up with a tantrum and have the kid brush their teeth. Is that loving the child? No. So as a parish priest, when I know a soul is in danger, my love for you will not allow me to let it happen, even if you're a little upset with me, which you shouldn't, because I wouldn't judge anyone. I'm a sinner myself. I don't want you to judge me. I don't want to judge you. But I do want God to forgive you, and he can do that through the sacrament of confession. And I don't care who you are in the room. Everyone needs to go. If there is a unifying factor for all human beings, the greatest equalizer is that we all sin, and we all need a Savior. And I want you to go to heaven. And here's how you go to heaven. You have to be in this. You know what? I don't know if I've ever heard, anytime, ever, a homily where a priest said, if you are in the state of mortal sin, which includes these very things that people do all the time now. They don't even realize how simple they are to do. And by the way, I understand them. The temptations are unbelievable. And they include these things. Okay? You need to be freed from that. And I know that if you're doing that right now, and it's anonymous, I don't know. But I know if you're doing that right now, you don't feel good about it. And you want to feel good. And you don't know if you can be forgiven. But you can be forgiven. And that burden can be freed from you in a way that will make you literally skip out of the confessional in greater joy than you may have had in years. And I want that for you. I literally want that for you so bad. By the way, for me, it's tiring. If I have to sit in the confessional for like 8 hours, I'm exhausted. I'd rather do other things. But for you, I want you to have that. And I want to be there for you so you can have that. And you can come up and you can receive the Eucharist and have all of that explosion of grace that comes through it. By the way, isn't that a message of love? I mean, that is a message I'm not telling you to go to confession because I'm great and you're not, and you go do it. Even at great pain to me, and by the way, as a priest, you're not trying to tell them your burden all the time. You're not doing it for that reason. But you're saying, hey, it'd be way easier for me to just have nobody go to confession. I'd free up my Saturdays. I would rather be so busy that even on my day off, I'm hearing your confessions. Because the entire reason that I'm here is for all of you to go to heaven. Oh my gosh, this is going to be great. We're there. You think the greatest party you've ever had. Let's all go to heaven together. You all want to go to heaven with me? That's where I want to go. And I want to take you there. There's some things we need to do together to get there. That's a pretty exciting and inspiring message. And whether that message is through, I'm not writing your homilies. I'm giving a message to your people in the ways that leaders do. That's how we do it. We move their mind and we move their heart. A picture is worth 1,000 words. You've heard that, right? An analogy and a metaphor is worth 1,000 pictures. That's why Jesus used them all day long to speak to them in language that draws them in, but to speak to them with love. I'm telling you, how many of you remember being in tears, and if you didn't have that gift of tears that God ever gave you for whatever reason, but if you did, how many remember that experience of being forgiven? Remembering that experience. That is an incredible experience. Why wouldn't we want that to be added? This gift that you would have. And by the way, that gift comes with action and behavior. We cannot define for ourselves what it means to love our neighbor. We have been given a playbook on what it means to love our neighbor. So let's follow the playbook. And let me give you some metrics here, okay? We can know. Wouldn't you like to know, when you go get your vital signs taken, don't you like to know how you're doing, how your heart's doing? And when you have somebody that's training you, don't you like it when they say, hey, if you eat this regimen at these times and you do these particular exercises, you will get this outcome? There's a spiritual regimen. And there's some basic low-level aspects of spiritual regimen to have basic spiritual health, and they include precepts of the church, and then talk about those. They include, all, and then you would go through and you would say, but you know what? Most of you, in some place in your life, you want to be exceptional. I know that. You're I don't want to just learn this, I want to be great at it. I don't want to just run a race, I want to win. I want a PR, I want that. There's nothing that is more important than getting a PR in holiness. So let me give you a roadmap. By the way, opt-in only. There's no scorecard. I'm not going to walk up to you and judge about it. I'm just going to invite you into something that I know is good for you that I want you to have in your life. You're going to Mass not just every week, but you can nothing wrong with stopping in. Even adoration, confession once a month, what this does for your soul, daily prayer, and then you start them in a practical sense, of course. You're not like, you say every single decade of the rosary starting tomorrow or you're going to have a problem. But you enter into that. Okay, that's actually the bigger picture of that. Why? Because what I'm talking about gets them to heaven. Why are you going to this class? What is the purpose of the class you're going to? What is the purpose of the Bible study you're going to? What is the purpose of this long process that you're entering into? Why are you doing this? Because my mom wants me to. She does. Do you know why she wants you to? Because she wants you to go to heaven forever and not hell forever. Which we shouldn't be afraid to remind people of, by the way. I mean, doctors say you'll get a heart attack. That's equal to you'll go to hell. Like literally, you will have good health, heaven. You have a heart attack. Yeah. You don't study in school. You won't have a job, poverty, hell. You'll have a job. It'll go well, heaven. So why are we afraid to talk about the consequence here? It's a bigger consequence than anything else. Somehow we're afraid of it? Hell's not a swear word in church. Okay? So, all right. Thoughts, questions, ideas on anything else? Yes, Father.
We've heard a variety of perspectives on planning.
Yes.
And, should you have a strategic plan, a priority plan, whatever you want to call it?
Yeah.
What's your take on
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. Planning, strategic plans, these are all very, very good things to have. They always have to point, is this going dead? Okay. They have to point in the direction of the mission. I want you to present your plan. I want you to tell me why that plan is going to get us people in heaven. How does your plan tie to the big picture? That alignment is super important. If they can't tie it to the big picture, so one of the things you hear in corporate leadership and training is all the time that people need to know how they fit into the overall mission. This is a burden that I would say you have less than anybody else. Like that's the easiest definition of anything you do. Like your mission is so simple, get everybody to heaven. Now you can catechize everybody on your team. Are you going through that? Well, okay. We need to remodel the bathrooms. Our strategic plan is we need to raise $15,000 by this date in order to do this remodeling project. Cool. How's that going to get more people to heaven? I don't know. Well, by the way, it is, just in case you're wondering, because them knowing that there's a bathroom here is going to make that done. You draw that connection for them. So now they get it. Now they're doing things in light of all of that, and they start to do their planning in light of that, which makes them sometimes say, well, maybe we shouldn't do that. Or you talk about the primacy of first, the law of primary responsibility. Does it make sense for us to put our investment there, or should we put our investment in getting more people to confession? Let me ask you this. If we have really great bathrooms and we have a bunch of people coming here, okay, but I can objectively say that we had 1,000 people receive the Eucharist this weekend, because I had somebody going by going click, 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 click. I heard it, okay? And we literally are averaging like 30 people in confession, and it is literally, it's a repeat of 25 of them. What is my first priority? Okay. Is there any priority that you would do that would supersede getting more people to confession? I can't, I literally can't, I can't. And I don't want you to answer because I would be able to tell you you're wrong. I would. And that whatever priest, not priest, you'd be wrong. What good is it that you have a new playground and new bathrooms and the people using them are in the state of mortal sin, marching up, eating, drinking condemnation upon themselves, and you're not trying to solve that? That's like a big problem. So then the question is this. Don't answer this question. Please do not answer this question. This is a question I ask corporate executives on things that are directly related to their job. So I'm going to ask you anonymously. How many of you have given a full court press to getting people to confession, knowing, and by the way, some of your parishes are like, see my parish, man. We've got like 1,000 people going up to communion. We've got like 2,000 going to confession because the other neighboring parishes come to ours. I'm sure that's out there too. So I'm not saying this is everywhere. It's just more problematic in other places. And most of you every 6 years are inheriting a problem too that you didn't even start. So what happens is when this is the case, how many of you have given a full court, absolute, no doubt about it, sincere and exhausting effort to get everybody to confession? Don't answer that. But that's a question I want to ask you. Have you exhausted it strategically, mentally, emotionally? Have you pulled your entire team into it? Does the team that you have around you go to confession, or do they not go to confession? Because if they don't believe in it, and they're not going to help you with it. Are you going to confession regularly? That's another question. The question is, do you see the significance of it? Do you know what's going to happen to your parents if you get people to confession? I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. You are going to quadruple the size of your parish, in a very short period of time. You are going to reduce divorce. You are going to increase fidelity. You are going to have more seminarians go through your parish than any other parish. You are going to radically change everything. The money will flow into the parish. The involvement will flow into the parish. But when you have mortal sin in the people that you have there, blocking them from all of those things, and then you just keep trying to, come up with a better music director, come on. That's not going to happen. Okay? By the way, the video of the beautiful music, I'm not talking about that sort of thing. I'm talking about like exchanging one rock mass person for the next rock mass person. And here's why that works. You know why it doesn't work with the teen masses like that? It's so hilarious. Let me just give you the mind of a teenager on that. Oh, a teen music mass. Have you listened to like the music teenagers listen to? First of all, it's very horrid in its language, but it's also good. Like it sounds good. Just go back to like being that age, not now. As you get older, Guns N' Roses and hip hop sounds ugly and Mozart sounds beautiful, right? But go to that age. That sounds pretty good. Like the talent is like pretty intense of young performers today. It's pretty awesome. And you really think that the church ladies are going to like compete with that by up there on a Sunday night with the mass? I'm sorry, the teenage kids think that's hilarious. And you're not drawing them in with the cool music. They're like laughing at that. So let's not compete with that. You know why they're going to come? Because if they don't, they're not going to go to heaven. Which is a much better sales pitch than, hey, Martha's got some pretty hip jive going. Like, how about salvation? That's the thing that's going to work. Okay? So you're all like afraid to laugh. You're literally going, you're like trying to not laugh out loud at that one. Okay. Next question. Before Jason pulls me off and says, oh my gosh, I don't even want to see what these surveys sound like. Yes. Okay. I have a few. Was that Father? Were you raising your hand? No? Okay. A few other just kind of last thoughts about this to help as we go through this. When you are leading your team, giving a speech, doing anything, you always have three audiences. I addressed this just briefly before, but if you walk into it always knowing you have three audiences, it's way more effective. So there's a lot of people that are sitting in church, just like if you were to like start a sales program. Again, I use sales as an analogy. If you were to start a sales program, there's a lot of people that kind of wonder if they can do it. They kind of doubt if they can do it. They say to themselves, I don't like making phone calls. I don't like objection or rejection, so I don't know. Then there are some people who are melancholic in nature. Do you know the temperaments? So like a sanguine person is a person who's like, woo, you can recognize a sanguine because everything they wear matches. They know where the great restaurants are. And if you look in their closet when they're an adult, you're going to see like a tutu, a tennis racket, Rosetta Stone, and a guitar. They can't play the guitar. They can't dance. They don't know a foreign language. Okay. But they have an outfit to match everything. That's that person. Okay. Then there's the cleric. The cleric is like in charge, ready to make it happen, going to go for it. You don't have to motivate them. The melancholic is the person who walks in the room and goes, don't know why they did it that way. Could have done it better. Okay. And then, of course, there's the phlegmatic who's just making sure that everybody's happy why all this is going on. When you're working with these particular people and you have somebody that has a skeptical view, you have to think about this. How many of you have been in the presence of a person who you know you can't change their opinion? Then don't waste any time doing it. Okay? Just don't waste it. You do, you shake the feet and you move on. They're in every single audience that you speak to. This is not true. It's a good way to think about it, even though it's not true. Given enough numbers, it is always true. If you have 3 people in a room, there's probably not 3 audiences. They could be totally united and unified. In fact, in this room, I think we're probably unified, but maybe not. I am speaking to you as though there's 3 groups. There's one group. I don't like what you're saying. I don't believe what you're saying. And all I'm doing right now is I'm trying to find reasons why I don't even like you more. Okay? Then there's another group, which is, man, that was great. I want more. And I want to package that even more. And you know what he should have said? Because I was thinking that same thing too. And he should have said this because it would have made the point even more. They're like even more on than you. But the vast majority of people, by far the biggest majority of people who are willing to be influenced if you influence them. And this is what I would do, okay? Hey, you're going to make phone calls tonight. You're a sales group, right? And I know this is like when a lot of people in sales quit. They try to make phone calls. They don't like it. They quit. You're going to make phone calls tonight. I just want you to know there's one of three groups in here. Somebody out there is going to make phone calls, and they're going to have tremendous success right away. Like your statistics are going to be through the roof good. That is the worst thing that could possibly happen to you because it's not going to go like that all the time. There's another group here, small percentage, where you're going to have the worst luck ever, and you know what? You're going to feel like, oh my gosh, this was horrible, and you might even come in the next day, and you're going to look at me, and you're going to go, it was horrible on the phone, and you're going to see me look at you, and it's going to be with compassion, but you're going to see a little glimmer in my eye that looks like, you're going to be like, are you laughing? And I'm not laughing, but here's the good news that I know that you don't know. That's not going to happen again tonight. The numbers that person had that was good, they're not going to happen again. These aren't going to happen again. I mean, every once in a while. But mostly it's going to be the group of you that are in the middle that are getting the statistics we're talking about. But there's probably a universal thing in here. And then I would ask this question. I say, does anybody here like making phone calls? And there's always like one person. And they go, yeah. And I'm like, freak. And they always laugh because they know they're complimenting them. Okay. I say, you're like if you think of Dwayne Johnson, he's a freak of nature physically, right? That's it's a compliment to that. Anybody who would like the phone, everybody else is like, I wish I did that. But what I also want you to know is this. How many of you don't like making phone calls? Everybody raises their hand. I said, if you don't like making phone calls, you profile psychologically like a top performer. Almost no top performer likes making phone calls. Almost no top performer in anything likes the major disciplines of it. The athletes don't like the diet and the working out, which is why then when they're retired, they stop doing that mostly. Okay? There is something that people don't like about every job or role they have, and it's the very thing that makes them great, which is why doing what you don't feel like doing is the key to success here. What I just did in that is I invited everyone in. That's a practical way to apply thinking like a criminal. A person is saying, I don't like making phone calls, therefore I'm going to use that as my justification for quitting. And I literally took that and I put it on its head. Well, holiness isn't for me. See, because you all know this better than anyone because you hear confessions. But people are like, I have a problem with chastity, but I'm not like everybody else. I mean, I like sex. And they think that they're unique. And you're like, just so you know, everyone does. This is a universal thing. But they want to be exceptional. See, most people, when they want to exit from something, they want to be exceptional. Well, my burden is so exceptional that I can't do it. And you have to help them get past that in order to get there when you're leading them as well, too. It is a great pleasure to be with all of you. I know that some of the stuff that I said is kind of like abrupt and making change on it, too. I want you to know that I understand the sensitivity of timing, the sensitivity of speaking to the heart, the sensitivity of the politics of some of the things you deal with in order to get it done. I know that these things are not just simple. I would not ever walk into a parish and believe that a person can just go like that and make it happen, and that if they didn't, it was just because they didn't feel like it. You have a tremendous burden and therefore a tremendous opportunity to overcome things that will create an environment of great. But it is just it's always worth the fight in leadership, and what you do is more important than anybody else at all could possibly do. You can actually administer the sacraments, and you can be that direct, what is it, persona Christi, right? That's what you can be, and nobody else can be that. You're the only one that can do that. And the very fact that you can do that and then apply other leadership aspects is awesome. So thank you so much.